G'day everyone and welcome to Malts with Mates. I'm somewhiskybloke and today we have Miika from Kyro Distillery here to tell us all about his whiskey and his distillery. Miika, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ah, fantastic. So what are you drinking today? I might get that out of the way quickly and ask. What are you sipping on?
So I got one of our single malt rye batches going on here. Don't know if you can see it. It's one of Kalle's, our head distiller's specials, and it's an Oloroso cask version. And having single malt rye, 100% rye in an Oloroso cask is something completely new. But so is most of the things we do, since we're from a new whiskey area and doing our own thing.
Well, that was something actually funny you say that. Years ago, I was working with an independent bottler, and I asked them, do we have any rye in Oloroso? Because I thought that would be something fantastic just to really emphasize the spice. So do you want to do us a quick tasting, if you don't mind, of the one you got with
Yeah,
you?
sure. So, as is typical for our rye, it's of course really heavy on the core rye character. And when I say core rye character, it's usually people who know a bit of rye whiskey, and especially from the US side, tend to think of it as sort of like hot spicy almost, or at least a bit on the aggressive side. But for us, it's a combination of factors, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that makes the rye really, really soft and sweet, but still incredibly full-bodied and a bit earthy. And when you combine that sweetness with the Oloroso sweetness, you get something that, for me, it's pretty incredible. So on the nose, it's the traditional, raisin sultanas thing that you get from Oloroso, but then you have the fresh rye bread, and it's a full-bodied 100% malted rye. So you get those single malt qualities coming in as well. So it's, for me, it's a thing that you just have to taste it and really find that new dimension in rye, that big, bold sweetness that we embark on it.
Fantastic. Well, I've got myself a bottle of your batch 8. It just came through the post the other day. Is this one also Oloroso cask matured, or have you experimented a bit and changed things up there?
We actually mostly mature in New American Oak and ex-bourbon. So the number 8 doesn't really have a big Oloroso cask component, but most of our batches would have something, either Oloroso or PX as a hint there, but not something that you generally pick up on its own. But then again, our process leads to a kind of rye sweetness that some might confuse with sherry casks, even when it's just been ex-bourbon or New American.
Excellent. And obviously as well, I believe the first time I ever encountered you, or I encountered Kyro, was at the London Whisky Show in, I want to say, 2018. At that point in time, you were producing, I believe, you only had the new make spirit on the market, but you've come a long ways since then. Could you walk us a bit through your distillery and your history?
Yeah. So in Finland, we love our sauna, so we have to take it real way back. And back in 2012, funnily enough, our story kind of starts from the whiskey show, where I got acquainted with rye whiskies for the first time. I was a big, single malts guy and didn't really know about rye. But then I had the master blender of Buffalo Trace hand me a glass of Thomas H. Handy, which was absolutely beautiful and just blew me away. And sometimes it just hits you like Finland, which is basically the home of rye. We eat tons of it, and rye whiskey. So why isn't anybody putting these two together? And for a year or so, I ranted and raved about it to anybody and everybody who would listen. And then, we had a weekend off at a cabin, and we were doing the typical Finnish thing, lake, sauna lake, and having a bit of rye whiskey on the side, of course. And after we had polished off a bottle of Rittenhouse, then we just started chatting. So should we do this? And should we just, abandon our careers and and become whiskey distillers, which in Finland is kind of unheard of. And that started us on the path, which was a long one, from 2012 to actually starting up the distillery in 2014, and now maturing through the years, making gin, nowadays making hand sanitizer, because that's what you do to survive, and that sort of thing. And now we are nearing the point where we'll actually launch our whiskey.
So, of course, Finland's got a long and elaborate alcohol history. As far as I can tell, from the whiskey side of things, that only stretches back a few decades, maybe a century. But it seems that other spirits have been more prevalent. Why the choice to do whiskey as opposed to a different rye spirit?
Yeah, I somewhat disparagingly usually call us a meat, potatoes, and vodka people here in Finland. So it's been a long tradition of making clear spirits ourselves and buying the fancy stuff, which usually in Finland has meant cognac from elsewhere. And we even have a national brand, which is really famous in Finland, which is just like cognac extended with neutral grain spirits. So like hot cognac, and that's been our sort of national cultural drink, and it's just weird. But then back in the 90s, we started opening up a bit. Everything used to be controlled by the government, and we started having the ability to produce ourselves and distribute ourselves and buy alcohol from abroad. The government still sells all of it to private persons since we have a retail monopoly, but from that point, it became possible to actually do it yourself. And back in 2002, 2003, we had a couple of whiskey distilleries starting, which are still going, which are both really quality institutions. But nobody had been doing rye whiskey before. And for us, it was that combination of rye and whiskey and getting that together. That was really the key for our launch.
So, do you encounter any difficulties? As I understand, you're using 100% rye in the mash bill. Do you encounter any difficulties in your distillation or your fermentation?
Yeah, well, rye isn't easy. It definitely isn't. So, from the beginning, we decided that when we were doing some trials, actually back in our head distiller Kalle's basement, but well, not even his basement, his parents' basement. So it was a real sort of like backyard operation. And we started experimenting how to get the maximum taste out of rye and really have our rye whiskey taste like rye rather than something that from some US rye with a low rye recipe, you might get, mix it up with a bourbon or whatever. So we wanted to take the rye to 100%. And how to do it then and how to extract maximum flavor, we decided that we'll do a whole grain process. So we'll put everything through the whole shebang, and all our solids and all the protein will travel from our mill to mashing to fermentation to the first distillation. So you can imagine the strain that puts on everything from our pre-masher to mashing to fermentation mixers to all the pumps in between, and what kind of a thing it is to pump that mixture full of those solids into our wash still and then wash it and clean it time after time. So it's not that much fun for distillers, but it yields a really pretty amazing liquid.
No, it certainly does. And obviously as well, you're drinking the batch 2, I'm drinking the batch number 8. Is there any reasoning behind the batch? Is this so you can find your feet with the flavor as opposed to releasing just a standard release first?
Yeah, I think this is our take on putting some liquid out there, hearing feedback, and finding our way towards what it is the core distillery expression and the core character of the liquid. And we've now released, as you said, 8 batches, and we've got a couple of specials that don't follow that same numeration line coming out. But late August this year, we'll have our first mainstay SKU on the shelf that will be like, it will taste like this, look like this, feel like this, pretty much from here on out. And of course, that's a pretty bold statement considering how small our stock is. So there might be some evolution, let's say, in the taste profile. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
No, of course. And I assume at that point in time, you'll continue to push boundaries and experiment with different things, even though you'll have your standard SKU.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Yeah. That was another thing that sprang to mind, because if we read through your website, you mentioned that you're brutally Finnish. And obviously you're governed by EU regulations in terms of whiskey manufacturing. And I understand that in the EU regulations, you have the option to use any type of wood as opposed to just oak.
Yeah.
Is there any type of Finnish oak, or will you be finishing in any cask previously containing Finnish spirit in the future, or maybe at this time?
Well, there are plans. We are slightly hampered by the fact that we are really up north, so we don't get a lot of tree growth going on. So when you chop something down, you'll have to wait for quite a bit for it to grow back. So we don't have those massive oak forests going on. So if we would use Finnish oak, which is a protected tree here, we wouldn't get too far. We can do some cask ends, sure. And there are some other variants or close relatives of oak that we might look at using. But the Finnish trees, by and large, have adapted to Arctic conditions, and from a maturation perspective, you're not going to get that much out of them. So it's not really the trees we're looking to capture some of that Finnish essence or spirit. It's rather going towards old varieties of rye grain. It's going towards old processes of drying out rye grains and working with rye in different shapes and forms, and then just finding the perfect cask pairing for that, since eventually we have to be about the liquid. The liquid needs to be absolutely top, rather than just us trying to force in an experimentation on it.
No, that's quite something. I can respect that you're doing, you're wanting to experiment with the raw materials itself as to just experimenting with a different maturation. Looking at my map here, I always forget how far north Finland actually is. Do you encounter any difficulties during your maturation because of your location?
For sure. And we get the double whammy of both location and regulation being quite exotic. So when you come to visit, and I hope you do one of these days at the distillery, we've got our new maturation warehouse, which is built in a certain way, and there's tons of other code I won't go into. But from liquid quality and profile perspective, there's a couple of interesting things. First of all, we are very swingy temperature area. We can go from minus 30 Celsius to plus 30 Celsius. So there's a 60 Celsius band in between. And in that band, of course, when we go towards the lower end, nothing happens if we just let it be like that. The maturation just dies. So what we do is that we've combined our cask storage with our distillation process, and we pump the hot water that we get out of the distillation process through the cask maturation and get some temperature fluctuation going. And the other thing is that because of some pretty weird regulation, we have to cap the temperature of the warehouse to 22 degrees. We tried telling the officials that you should go to somewhere like Kentucky and on the upper levels of Heaven Hills warehouses or Caribbean and see how hot it is there to mature alcohol, but they wouldn't listen. So we have to cap it at 22. So we actually have an air-conditioned massive whiskey warehouse where we can control the temperature, both the low point, the top point, and also the humidity in between. So we can do these weird experiments where we almost have like Caribbean conditions in one segment of our warehouse and then core Finnish summer conditions in one, and then Scotland in the third. And and we can do these sort of weird maturation experimentations. But of course, getting to grips with that is going to take time, and we're only in the beginning. But it's really damn interesting.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. I wouldn't have expected to find a Finnish distillery with a air conditioning in it. Much the opposite. I would have thought you would have wanted to get all the certainly, I'll have to have a look at those regulations and try to wrap my head around them. Hopefully, one day you can apply that the Finnish government take it away. So, when you initially started out and you said to everyone, we want to do 100% rye malt whiskey, what was the reaction from family, friends, in the general whiskey community around you? Was it a welcoming, or did you find a lot of people just had no idea how to respond?
Yeah, well, since it's been such a regulated industry, and we have a massive government majority-owned producer almost next to us, where we are, who produce something around 25 million liters of vodka every year, plus other stuff. So that was the image of actually making the alcohol for most people. Then, of course, you have your whiskey hobbyists who would come in the early stages. Like, some would be very open-minded and tell us like, yeah, way to go, guys, and this is really exciting. And then somebody would be, oh, you'll never be as good as Laphroaig 10. We're like, they do fantastic whiskey. We don't want to be Laphroaig 10. We need to be something else. So I think it was not the most hospitable of industries to come into, especially in Finland. But then again, we were really supported by our families. There's 5 of us founders, so we could support each other and really start hacking at this and make the decision that we're not going to buy anybody else's liquid. We're going to make all of our own and then release it when it's done, and somehow squeak by. Of course, our gins turned out to be much bigger than anybody thought, which helped. But it was interesting.
No, that's quite something. I also want to ask. Suzanne from Irish Drams commented on one of the posts advertising this. She was saying that her husband quite enjoyed your whiskey, and you told her that he'll have to wait until you bottle it. So there's something in the storehouse. Is there something special that you have in there to bring out soon, or?
Yeah, there's something pretty special coming up. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of special editions now coming out. There's the Finnish whiskey, National Finnish Whiskey Day on the 23rd of this month. We've got one edition coming out with the local whiskey club, and that actually has a very distinct mash bill. And this goes back to what I was saying about exploring these old customs and habits around rye. And we've got a strain of rye that's called Rye. It's its own rye genus, and it's been traditionally treated so that when you harvest the rye, then you tie it up in sheaves, you put it on the top of your rafters in your barn that's not got a chimney, and you burn mostly alder and a bit of birch to dry those out, and you pick up smokiness naturally on the rye grain. And it's really interesting because compared to peating, of course, which has been the traditional Scottish way, or pretty traditional over there, this also came out of the need to get the rye dried fast so that you can go back to the fields and plant new crop. Since all our rye is winter rye, it has to go under the snow to survive the winter and then grow in spring. And that's driven, sort of this old process has driven a natural way of getting smoke on the rye. And this has been a long time in development, and the first batches are coming out from that. So it's not only Oloroso that we're trying out with 100% rye, it's also new kinds of smoke qualities and profiles that we're going to dabble in and bring out to you to taste.
Now that sounds absolutely fantastic, and we can't wait to actually to see it come out and to see what you can do.
It's my favorite mash bill.
It's your favorite mash bill, that one?
Yeah, yeah.
I guess from a personal perspective, with yourself, do you prefer rye whiskies over? I assume you prefer rye whiskies over single malts nowadays. If you were to look around, who would you say is your favorite producer aside from yourself?
It's a good question. There's a fantastic rye culture coming up in Europe. There's been distilleries who've been doing it for a while and doing really, really quality stuff. And here I'm thinking first and foremost, Zuidam in the Netherlands and their fantastic Millstone rye, which has always been a favorite. Then there are new kids on the block like us, Domaine de la Haute Glace in France and Stauning in Denmark. And of course, a couple of really good players in England and UK as well. But from the US ryes, I still have to say Thomas H. Handy would be my favorite, since it was the thing that drew me into rye in the first place. Of course, crazy expensive, and they should definitely send me some allocation because I can't get it in Finland anywhere. I can't even get it in Europe, almost. So it's hard to put your hands on. But yeah, that's still if I want to really show somebody what rye is like when somebody's been really making it for a long time and at high quality, then that's what I go to.
Well, if anyone who's watching now or in the future works for Buffalo Trace and Thomas Handy, I hope that they'll take pity and send you a bottle.
Yeah.
Miika wants a little bit of whiskey. I suppose as well, that begs the question, once you had your aged whiskey finished and bottled, did you take it? Did you send any to Buffalo Trace as a kind of thanks to say you got me into this?
Yeah, it was actually a funny story. When I got into this whole thing in 2011, that's when I met Drew Mayville, their master blender at the whiskey show. And the whiskey show later, I've been going up to him and I still remember me. Here's a sample, it's been sort of this fun ritual. I really hope that they can organize this year. So if Sukhinder Singh, you hear this, I'm rooting for you. Like, hopefully the corona will go away enough and I can get to taste some fantastic whiskeys over there and give Drew Mayville his yearly bottle. I hope he's still working, by the way. So I still remember those words that he said to me when the next year, 2 years after the first touch, I came back to the show. I took a bottle of our new make in my backpack I took the show glass, went to the bathroom and poured the show glass full, and then just started going around all the booths and asking all the master blenders or distillers who were present to taste some of our new make. And Drew was one of them who had a taste, and he said that, guys, this is fantastic. I need to up my game. And that was sort of, for me, a really big boost for us to start with.
Well, that's fantastic. Actually, I love that you did that.
Yeah.
I will actually have in a few weeks. I'll have someone from the Whiskey Exchange on, so I'll be making sure to ask them: are we going ahead with this? What are we thinking this year? Miika wants to show off his whiskey. I'll try and push that. Now,
or I'll bring a bottle in my backpack again and just sneak by.
I don't think they mind if people bring free whiskey in. I think they mind when people take whiskey away. I think that's the main thing there.
That might be.
And of course, speaking of festivals, is there any way that we can communicate with you and see Kyro Distillery in these times? So
we're actually because the times are pretty tough and destination tourism is going to be it's going to have hard times for a long time. So we're working on a virtual distillery tour. But you should definitely go and check out our website, www.kyrodistillery.com, KYRO. And there's a lot of video imagery, all sorts of stuff over there. We're not currently doing live tastings because the Finnish law doesn't allow us to do live tastings. things. That's another tricky part. So we've actually started up a company in Germany in order to maybe in the future do some of these for our European audience. Of course, not the Finns who are corrupted easily and cannot see such content, but we will see. And you'll find our bottles through our web shop if you live in the German-speaking area, but probably in the UK through Master of Malt or similar sites when more comes out.
Mm. No, fantastic, because we do want to give you all the support we can at this time. All right, so that's quite interesting. And then, of course, is there anything else that you'd want to say to the whiskey community at this time? Anything that you would like the whiskey community to keep doing or to pick up doing?
So, I think it's really interesting and really important to keep your mind open. And I know, like in these times, it's pretty rough for people out there. People are worried about their health and their income and all of that. So I think it might be slightly harder to keep up a really curious mentality about the world. And for us being from a completely new whiskey area and not having that legacy or a lot of other distilleries around us to push the message out of Finland, I think it's really important for people to go out there, try new stuff. Hey, what's this Finnish rye about? What's European rye whiskey about in general? And taste some fantastic new stuff and hopefully find some new favorites and find new ways of looking at rye as a category. Think about single malt and rye together, and all of these concepts that we do. So I really love the whiskey community, and I see myself as a hobbyist, a part of it, for that experimentation and finding new flavors. So I hope that goes on even throughout these times.
Well, to be completely honest and speaking very unbiased, the malt, the rye malt is fantastic. This is a really stunning whiskey. I'm actually kind of kicking myself that I've not tried any of the earlier batches, but the batch 8, which I believe is available right now through Master of Malt Whiskey Exchange, as you say, absolutely amazing whiskey, and I would definitely recommend that. Now, as you probably know, I emailed you about this as well. I always like to do at the end of these a fun little quiz, just to change things up. And I emailed a couple of people who you work with, and they told me that you're quite a football fan, and that you live and breathe Arsenal.
Yes.
And that you also like some tabletop RPGs.
Yes, I do.
So I've got some questions here about Arsenal Football Club and about Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, I will go after some people after this, definitely.
All right. So, by the way, if you don't get any right, don't worry. The best score at this point in time is David of Star Wars. Last week he got 6 out of 10 right, and it's just for a good laugh. Well, if anyone in the comments knows the if anyone in the comments knows the question, knows the answers as well, make sure that you key in. Don't let him see, but you know. All right.
Oh, there's a Spurs fan in the comments. Oh, this is going downhill fast.
Oh, with Soren. Yeah, Soren's there. Okay. G'day, Soren. So, Arsenal was the first club from the south of England to join the Football League. What year did they join?
1923.
You're a couple of years out. 1893, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm going to get slaughtered for this. Okay, go on.
In that time, they've only been regulated once. In which year were they regulated?
You mean relegated?
Yes, relegated.
I'm not a
football guy. I do rugby.
No worries. Definitely was not in Premier League time, so it was in 72.
1913.
Oh, whoa.
So, well, don't worry, because I'm about to make a fool of myself, because I'm going to butcher this name, something fierce.
Okay.
Arsene Wenger was unveiled as Arsenal manager in which year?
It's 96 and 97. Holy shit, if I fail on this one. He left 97.
It's 96. Who, however, was expected to land that position?
I do not know.
Johan Cruyff.
Ah.
He had just left Barcelona at the time and was expected to take the position, but Wenger got it. Apparently. Hi.
Well,
All right, last Arsenal question. Who was the first Arsenal player to score 100 goals?
Ian Wright.
Jimmy Brain.
Well,
He played between 1923 and 1931, scored 139 goals in 232 matches, and scored his 100th goal in his 144th match.
Yeah,
now,
I'm gonna lose all my status in Arsenal Finland after this, so I'll better take some more whiskey.
I can edit this entire part out. Don't worry.
Please.
I'll do a voiceover so you get all the questions right.
Please do.
Yes, Soren, they are tough questions. I don't know anything about football, so I just kind of had to look up trivia, and apparently this is what I got.
Yeah,
I've got some
I was
D&D
alive
questions
in the 20s and early 1900s, so it was tough.
You skipped out there. I actually missed all of that.
No worries. Let's move on.
I've got some D&D questions now. How are you with D&D?
Frankly, I used to run Rollmaster games, but I probably can do something about D&D, but this might be just complete whiff as well.
I think some of these you'll be able to get.
Yeah.
So one of Dungeons and Dragons' most famous spell is Floating Disc. But which magician gives their name to that spell?
Raistlin?
Tenza. Tenza's Floating Disc.
Yeah,
all right.
I predict this is going to be an absolute train wreck.
If you like, I could look up some more Arsenal questions very quickly. No. Can you describe what an Aasimar or a Zima and a Tiefling are? Oh, he's gone. Soren, you've jinxed it, and you caused Miika to walk out on me. We're not getting any sound through on you, Miika. No, unfortunately not.
How about now?
Yep, we've got you.
Okay,
there you are.
Good. Sorry, it wasn't the questions, honestly. It was my phone ringing and it disrupted the whole thing.
Okay. Yeah. I thought, Jesus, this has never happened. No one's walked out of an interview and literally out of the room over a virtual call.
No, no, it's not that bad. I can take any amount of humiliation, so lay it on me.
All right. Next question. Could you tell us in fantasy role playing what an Azima and a Tiefling are?
No.
Azima, they're D&D races. Azimas are half angelic, half human beings, and Tiefling are half demonic, half human beings. There's certainly different questions. I never expected I'd be doing a live interview with you asking these questions.
No, I mean, this is really awkward since I really never did D&D. I did a couple of other like Cyberpunk 2077 and Rollmaster, so this is just breezing past.
All right, in that case, I think I'll stop with the D&D questions then, because I think you said you're going to have words with the people I spoke to. I'm going to have words with the people I spoke to.
Yes, yes, certainly. I mean, if you had done Arsenal, like I lived in the UK for a bit. I actually moved in '97, so I should have gotten that Arsene Wenger question definitely. But after that, I would be golden. But the history just escapes me.
Well, I tell you what, Soren's quite a football buff, so maybe he could think of an Arsenal question for you as well. But if we're looking for a whiskey question, what can we grab quite quickly? So here's a nice whiskey question for you.
God.
The kilning process most commonly involves air blasting or drying your barley over coals or with hot air. But what other common things have been used previously to dry the barley?
Well, obviously burning peat would be the common thing.
Yeah, peat would be the common thing.
Yeah.
There are a couple of people in the world who are now drying their barley over sheep dung, which is
there's several levels of exotic. So for us to dry our rye with just burning alder and birch is still pretty on the safe zone.
I've no qualms against anyone using sheep dung or using any historical traditions like that. The only thing that's wrong with it is you can't help but think about it when you're drinking the whiskey, and that's all you can think about.
It's funny since when we started on this process of using that old drying method from Finland, we were sort of describing the Scottish process versus the Finnish process to some people, and in Scotland, after you've hacked away the trees, you've got pretty much either peat or sheep to burn. And you really want to burn the peat instead of the sheep. But then, then this sheep dung thing came along and sort of pulled the rug from under us. But hey, I respect people like the Icelandic distillery who does it, that they're true pioneers.
Oh no, they are doing something different, which is fantastic to see. Whiskey question. Whiskey can receive its color from two separate sources. What are the sources?
E150 and then of course casks, lignin breakdown materials.
Yep, even when in depth with lignin breakdown. It's a bonus point. I'm going to call that.
Yeah.
And I've actually got here, Soren's come in, and the Spurs fan has come in with a question as well. He'd like to know which manager managed both Arsenal and Tottenham in the modern era. Soren, you're going to have to answer this question, by the way, because I don't know.
It's modern era, like Premier League, past 92. Can't be Graham, can it?
We've honestly got to wait for
Oh,
him.
it was
George
Graham.
Graham.
You
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, you got that. Nice.
Yeah.
I guess, of course, one more whiskey question. As you said, you started with we'll tick that up. So yeah, George Graham, completely correct there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
You started with you started drinking rye whiskey. You started drinking single malts. You moved on to rye whiskies, and of course, those from America. America's also got a very large bourbon scene. Whiskey has to have a minimum of 3 years maturation through the UK and Europe. In America, however, how long does bourbon need to stay in the cask for maturation?
Undefined time. It just has to stop by there. So a fraction of a second is okay.
I know I read about a distillery at one point in time that had set up literally a cask that you could move the cask in and out, and you would just run the spirit through it, and you know they were discovered, they were gotten rid of. But yeah, bourbon has no minimum maturation time. You do need to state the age of a bourbon if it's less than a certain number of years, but you do have bourbons that are as young as 3 or 4 months coming onto the market, which is quite interesting.
And it's weird how we sort of come about this. So in Europe, the word whiskey is incredibly regulated, and in the US, there's more regulation around the word bourbon. And for us, we actually got backstabbed by I don't want to say it, but Scottish Whisky Association. I'm going to say it anyway. In the latest update of EU whiskey regulation, because from like really late on in the process, we had seen the drafts up until that point, but really late on in the process, from somewhere out of the blue, there popped an additional phrase into the whiskey guidance and regulation saying that if you want to call your whiskey single malt, it has to be barley based. And for us, that was, of course, a highly what the moment, since we're making single malt rye whiskey. It's from one grain, it's unmalted, it's from a single distillery. It feels, from a quality and even from a heritage perspective, all the necessary requirements. And there's no reason why some other grain than barley, when it's malted, couldn't be single malt. But here we are. We can't call it single malt now.
Look, I think it's a really interesting argument because historically, whiskey would not have been made of 100% barley. Barley is used for all manner of things, and if you were to throw 100% barley into it, you wouldn't, you'd be running out of a resource to make food with. The same thing with casks. Obviously you can't have just pure ex-bourbon cask. You have to take all the casks you can. So it's funny that since kind of, I want to say the 50s and the 60s, people have spun this kind of myth around the history of whiskey, and they've said this is what it should be. But historically, if we look at it, it's just not true. I was going to ask about the Kyro malt and the single malt rye whiskey, and obviously, as long as the product's good and it is whiskey, I think it very clearly fits into all those definitions. But as an Australian, I've run into my own source of problems with the SWA over the years, who have said, who have reached as far as Australia and said, you can't call your distillery such and such because that implies that it's Scottish, despite the fact that you're from an area that is that name. It's interesting.
It's protectionism. That's what it is. But it's how the world works, and I think it's just emphasizing the fact that we need to carve out our own place as a completely new whiskey area, and whether we'll be in the family of European rye whiskies or continental rye whiskies or Nordic whiskies or Nordic single malt or whatever. I don't really care that much at this point, since we're still so small and we still need to find fans basically one by one. But yeah, it's a long journey to get there, and eventually there will be a place for us alongside our brothers and sisters making fantastic rye whiskies in Nordics and in Europe, somewhere on the shelf.
Well, look, I mean, I've no doubt that hundreds of years ago, Glenlivet, Glenturret, Macallan, Balvenie, all these brands we know and love, they were all made within someone's basement or within someone's farm. And, you know, you guys are starting out, but I've no doubt that in the future you'll create something that is uniquely yours. And with this whiskey, you've really got it. It's just about getting people to give it a try and see what they think. But we've hit 45 minutes, so I'll let you go because I believe you've got dinner on soon or something.
Yeah.
Don't want to keep you too long. But Miika, it was absolutely fabulous to have you on today. I hope that we can keep in touch, and we'll make sure that we check out Kyro Distillery, your website. We'll keep going through your whiskey and make sure that we can spread the good word about it.
Thanks very much. Well, as we, funnily enough, in Finland, when we toast at a rowdy party, we'll say "Rye Rye," which is appropriate for our kind of product.
What do you say? Sorry.
Rye Rye.
Rye Rye.
Rye Rye.
Cheers, Miika. Thank you, and thanks to everyone watching as well.
Cheers.
Cheers.